Hi everybody, we are continuing with our discussion of the French and Indian War, looking today at the effects, and as you did yesterday, you will be completing a note page that looks similar to the causes one, except this one focuses on effects, and that will be found at the end of the presentation. The French and Indian War learn it statement is the same as yesterday. I can't identify the causes and effects of events prior to and during the American Revolution, including the French and Indian War and the Boston Tea Party. So today we are looking specifically at the effects of the French and Indian War. And the essential question is, was it worth fighting for? Which is an important question, especially as we get closer and closer to the American Revolution. So effects of the French and Indian War, what is it all about? And really and truly, it is a clash of empire between Great Britain and France over this disputed area here, the rich fertile land that is necessary and important to southern, especially southern plantation owners for growing of crops, not to mention the abundance of furs that are available in that area. And so both France and Great Britain are in competition, I guess, or conflict over control of that land. And it's more than just control of that land. It's, it's whoever wins this really wins control over North America in general. And so that's a pretty big motivating factor to go to war. Just a really quick review of how this begins. A young George Washington is sent to request that the French leave the territory in the Pennsylvania area, and is asked to build a fort where three rivers meet. He is sent there not to kill anybody, but ultimately that is what happens when he engages in a surprise attack on the French ambassador, killing the French ambassador, and lo and behold, a young George Washington, who's trying to make a name for himself as a commander in the British Army, ends up igniting our First World War. He very quickly retreats after killing the ambassador, and him and his men create very, very quickly a fort, a circular fort called Necessity, and on the inside is where Washington and his men are, trying to seek refuge from the French army that is attacking them as a result of Washington killing their ambassador. He is unsuccessful in fighting off the French army, and therefore decides to surrender to the French. Certainly not his finest moment, and for someone who was probably trying to make a name for himself in the British Army, really got off to a bad start with the French and Indian War. He surrenders at Fort Necessity, and you can see here George Washington's signature on the surrender documents. In other parts of the colonies, we have some very influential people, or people that will become influential as we study the events of the American Revolution, that are trying to inspire all the colonies to fight together. And one of those influential people is Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin is about 48 years old at this time, and he is trying very hard to inspire and motivate and convince and persuade all the colonies, all 13 colonies who are really quite accustomed to doing things their own way. Each colony has their own type of currency. Each colony taxes their own people. They have their own types of governments. They all do things differently. And in this instance, though, when it comes to fighting against the French, he is trying to send a message or a plea that they all put aside any differences they may have, because they don't all get along. To be honest with you, the colonies don't necessarily get along. They're all founded for different reasons, whether it's for economic gain or for religious freedom, and they're very individualistic. And he is essentially, through this cartoon that he made, sending a message to the colonies to fight together against the French, because if they do not, they could likely die or perish at the hands of the French. And this snake, which is a very common caricature in many political cartoons of this day and age, is divided into segments. And if you notice, along each of the segments you see initials. And each of these initials stand for a colony, like Rhode Island, for example, Maryland, Virginia, South and North Carolina, New Jersey, New York, and then the NE represents all of the New England colonies. So he's pleading with leaders of the colonies to fight, to convince their colonies in their control to join together to fight as more like a country as opposed to 13 separate countries. He is successful at convincing 7 of the colonies to sign his what's called his Albany Plan of Union, but they do not all sign. So it's partially successful. The war, as I said earlier, does spread to other parts of the world. It spreads to India, where both France and Great Britain have colonies. It spreads to Spain, and of course it's in Europe between France and Great Britain and Prussia, which is today we call Germany. And so this does become a global conflict. And in these parts of the world, it lasts for 7 years, as opposed to North America, where it lasts for 9. British differences between the colonists or the colonial fighters and the British are many. The colonists have learned for decades how to fight like Native Americans and have become quite skilled at guerrilla warfare tactics, unlike the British, who still fight and march in formation, in charge with bayonets, wearing bright red uniforms. The colonists also serve under their own captains and refuse to follow orders from any British officers. Discipline for colonists is practically non-existent, and the colonial fighters have absolutely zero respect for British officers and refuse to pay them that respect. Unlike the British, who are all about drills and tough discipline, the colonists are just the opposite. The colonial fighters also resist any kind of rising taxes that the British may impose upon them, whereas the British are saying, hey, if you want us to defend you against the French and help protect you, then you need to pay for that. It isn't free. And the colonists are not at all open to that idea. The colonists or colonial fighters are very casual, unprofessional, undisciplined, and the British officers, of course, are very refined and used to having servants and being served with tea. The war does eventually end. Great Britain loses this war, and as a result of that war, a treaty is signed in Paris, France, in 1763. France loses all of its Canadian possessions, most of her empire in India, and claims to lands east of the Mississippi River. Spain, who also fought in this war on the side of the British, get all of the French lands west of the Mississippi River, the port of New Orleans, but they did lose Florida to England. England, or Great Britain, gets all of French lands in Canada, exclusive rights to Caribbean slave trade, and commercial dominance in India. So this is what North America looks like in 1763. This red line here represents the Appalachian Mountains, across which the colonists are forbidden to travel. They are, after fighting 9 years to actually enter into this territory to farm and to hunt and so forth, they are now, after winning the war against France, told they can't do that, simply because Great Britain cannot afford to build forts there to protect them. And of course, the colonists here are like, they could care less if anybody is protecting them. They don't need the British to protect them, and they continue to cross over that Appalachian line or that proclamation line anyway. So just another map of North America. Here's that proclamation line along the Appalachian Mountains. that the settlers are not allowed to cross over, again, emphasizing the fact that they fought 9 years to be able to do just that and were forbidden to do that. And of course, Spain now controls quite a bit of the, really 2/3 of, or at least 50% of present-day United States. So the effects of the war on Britain: it increased her colonial empire in the Americas. It greatly enlarged England's debt, which we're going to be talking about as we move closer to the American Revolution, and Britain's contempt or disgust really for colonists. Therefore, England felt that major reorganization of the British Empire in the 13 colonies, the American Empire, was necessary. Effects of the war on American colonials: it united them against a common enemy for the first time. So now, they're starting to think more along the lines of one country as opposed to 13 separate countries. It created a socializing experience for all the colonials who participated in it. And so now you have these colonists from various parts of the British colonies that are becoming friendly with one another, and getting to know one another, and see the possibility of the colonies actually working and cooperating with one another in a way that they never had before. It also created bitter feelings toward the British that would only intensify as time goes by. So, filling out your chart, at the end, the effects of the French and Indian War: the French lose the war and all land in North America. The English inherit vast new land holdings in North America. Great Britain accumulates huge war debts, so they've got a lot of money they've got to pay back. Colonists realize British are not invincible and seek independence, and that's pretty important. The colonists realize that the British have some weak points that they can perhaps take advantage of if they ever decide that they want to join forces as 13 united colonies to fight for independence against Great Britain. England sees responsibility to defend the empire in North America, and as a result, they're going to tell the colonists they can't cross that proclamation line because trying to protect them from Native American attacks and so forth is going to be incredibly difficult. And finally, King George and Parliament decide to tax the colonies to help pay for these huge debts that they have acquired as a result of this 9-year war in North America against France and various Native American tribes, as well as the war that they fought in other parts of the world at this same time. That concludes our presentation on the French and Indian War, both causes and effects. And please let me know if you have any comments or questions. Take care.